The wind came down hard from the peaks. It rolled across the flight line in long gusts that lifted tarp corners, rattled loose cable coils, and carried the scent of fuel and frost through the narrow valley. Fog crawled in low from the tree line, hugging the gravel and the edge of the concrete pads. Blades turned overhead. One UH-60 Blackhawk had already lifted off, rotors cutting through the mist with a weight that made the air vibrate. Another waited behind it, lights flashing dull amber through the haze. Sloane walked the line with a rope bag over one shoulder and a checklist clipped to the back of her glove. The paper flapped in the wind, unread. She already knew what it said. Rider, non-eval, her name next to it in block letters, followed by no call sign. She stopped by the staging crate and set the rope bag down. The metal was slick with condensation. Cold soaked through her sleeves as she adjusted the coil. No one was watching her. That was the point. 20 meters ahead, a flight crew circled around their bird, trading call-outs. One of them, a broad-shouldered tech with his vest half-zipped, nodded toward her without making eye contact. Dead weight still sorting line. The others chuckled. Someone muttered, "Glad she's not mine today." Sloane didn't flinch. She kept her hands on the coil, adjusted the last strap, and stood slowly. She could still hear the morning briefing in her head. The instructors had read off the assignments, fast and clipped. Her name had come last, attached to no responsibility, no mention of the drills, no harness issue, no rappel run, no climb order. Just ride along, observe, stay clear. She folded the checklist and slipped it into the front panel of her vest. Her fingers brushed the edge of a different sheet there, one she had folded herself. The route diagram. She had drawn it the night before by headlamp, tracing the altitude band and ridgeline based on what she'd overheard during the last 2 planning cycles. No one asked her to. No one knew she had it. The cold seeped deeper as she moved back toward the support frame. A cart clanged to the side as 2 other trainees dragged a half-locked gear cage toward Bay 3. Sloane stepped out of the way without being asked. "You good," one of them said as they passed, not really looking at her. "Yeah," she said simply. The word dropped and vanished. By mid-morning, the fog had thickened. Visibility cut down to 40 meters. Radios crackled on side channels. The instructors stood shoulder to shoulder under the tarp by the debrief tent, pointing at tablets and flight logs. Sloane wasn't called over. She stood near the rear crate, rechecking straps on the ladder stowage without touching it directly. Her gloves were already wet, her shoulders aching slightly from how she'd been holding herself too still, too invisible. Across the pad, a bird spun up for its next lift. A few crew members ran out to hook a harness bag to the tail. Sloane watched the motion. Quick, smooth, automatic. One instructor noticed her watching and barked across the gap. "Eyes on your own rig, Sloane." She nodded once, didn't speak. She walked back to her station, pressed one boot against the edge of the tie-down grate, and looked out toward the trees beyond the concrete. Somewhere behind them was the practice slope. She wouldn't see it today, not unless someone got hurt and she was told to clean it up. Later, during lunch, the hang tent filled with heat and voices. Sloane found an empty spot near the back wall. She unwrapped a protein bar and sat on an ammo box turned sideways. She could still hear the others talking near the heater, laughing about one trainee who got tangled in his own harness. "You see him," someone said, "like a bird in a laundry line." Another voice added, "She couldn't even climb out of the truck, and they let her touch a rope." The laughter swelled, then dropped. Sloane finished her bar and stood. No one looked over. She stepped out into the cold and didn't go far, just around the back of the fueling tent, where no one else would walk. She knelt beside the stacked crates, pulled her pocket rope from her jacket, and began threading it through a silent carabiner looped around a fuel tie. Her breath fogged in the air. The knots came quick and clean, overhand, figure 8. Prusik. She did not smile. She did not rush. She just prepared. The morning board was already half filled by the time Sloane stepped into the tent. Crew pairings, time blocks, exercise drills all listed in blue dry erase across the white panel. Her name wasn't there. She checked twice, scanning the columns out of habit, more than hope. Same as the day before. She stood off to the side as the others filtered in. Most glanced once at the board, nodded, and moved on. The ones who didn't get a slot complained loud enough for everyone to hear. One of them, a tall guy with a high fade and mirrored sunglasses tucked into his vest, scoffed when he noticed Sloane nearby. "You still on clipboard duty?" he asked, not expecting a reply. She didn't give one. By midday, her hands were red with cold. She had spent most of the morning hauling gear between pallets and trailers, harness bags, tether lines, coiled carabiners in buckets that clanged with every shift. She stacked crates by size and weight, adjusting straps others had left loose. Every time she passed the rope ladder in its stow rack, she looked once, briefly, then moved on. During the ladder prep demonstration, the trainees were called in a row. Sloane stood behind the group, outside the ring of voices, near the edge of the pad. When the instructor reached the end of the roster, he glanced toward her and shook his head. "You're non-cleared. Stay out." She stayed out. Another trainee struggled with the hook-in sequence. He twisted the harness strap, dropped a connector, then clipped it backward. The instructor fixed it for him and clapped him on the shoulder. "You'll get it. Good start." Sloane said nothing. After the group dispersed, she waited until the pads cleared, then walked around the rear of the tents to where she'd rigged her personal loop. The knot rope she carried was faded now, the middle wrapped with old tape to mark center. She practiced silently: bowline, alpine butterfly, clove hitch, fast, smooth, and unseen. Her gloves had frayed at the palm seam. She took off the left one, pulled a strip of tape from her pocket, and patched the tear. Her fingers were calloused, dry, and precise. From inside the tent, she heard laughter. A group of trainees joked about a sandbag drill gone wrong. She couldn't even lift her end. One said, "Like dragging a sack of wet paper." "You mean Sloane?" "Who else?" The voices carried, casual and careless. No one lowered their tone. No one checked if she was close. That evening, during equipment checks, she watched the rest of the crew pair off for weight testing. One group practiced controlled climbs with resistance bands. Another went over hand signal protocols. She was sent to the far end of the pad to inventory unused flares. The cold sank deeper. Her vest felt heavier, though nothing had changed. At mess, she waited until the line thinned and ate outside on a stacked crate, her tray balanced across one knee. No one joined her. A few passed by, joking among themselves, one slapping the other on the shoulder as they mimicked gear failures. She finished her food slowly and returned her tray without a word. Later that night, just before lights out, she walked the perimeter of the tents again. The ridge air was sharp, full of jet exhaust and pine and dust. She ducked behind the supply trailer and lit her headlamp. Its beam flickered, then held steady. She clipped her rope to the practice anchor she'd built earlier. Quiet, secure, out of sight. She climbed into position, knee pressed to the crate edge, and tied 4 knots in a row. Fast. Then again. Then with her eyes closed. Behind her, someone opened a flap and let it fall. The sound didn't rattle her. The next morning, she was sent early to prep the primary rope ladder for visual check. 2 crewmen talked near the stow rack. "Ladder's clean," one said, "but you know command's gonna freak if anyone actually slips." I'd freak too if Sloane was the one climbing. That rig would snap from embarrassment. Laughter followed. They didn't know she was standing 3 meters behind them, checking the tie down. She didn't turn. She adjusted the last strap, looped the excess rope to secure it, and stepped back. By noon, the skies cleared slightly. The instructors gathered everyone at the open pad for a dry run demonstration. A Blackhawk hovered at low altitude while the rope ladder deployed. It hung perfectly vertical. Below, trainees watched, necks craned, gloves over their brows. Sloane stood in the back row. One instructor pointed to the rope. "This is the tool you rely on when things go wrong. You clip right, or someone falls. You hold steady, or someone dies. You commit, or you freeze." The group murmured approval. Heads nodded. "Look close. You may not get another chance." Sloane did look. She didn't blink. She didn't speak. She knew the entire rig. The rung spacing, the weight rating, the flex under load, the anchor points inside the cabin, the difference in balance between nylon and polyblend rope. She had studied the cut diagram in silence for weeks. She watched the ladder sway in the wind, just slightly, then settle. She stood there, unseen in the crowd, hands folded behind her back, and imagined the climb. The wind shifted just after the second drop. What had been a low, steady crosswind turned sharp, swirling up the face of the ridge in fast, chaotic bursts. The clouds rolled low across the mountain ledge, flattening the light and narrowing visibility to the edge of the tree line. The UH-60 Black Hawk hovering overhead bucked slightly as its ladder deployed. Below, the rescue trainees scrambled to secure their footing on the uneven rock. The ladder came down fast, twisting halfway through its drop. One of the evac crew, Nate Ellis, lost his grip on a rock outcrop, slipped, and went down hard. His boot caught a fissure. When he tried to rise, he couldn't. Inside the Black Hawk, the crew tensed. Voices filled the channel. Movement on the north flank. Ladder fouled. Reset. Negative. They're not stable. One man down. Repeat, no extraction underway. Another team, staged to deploy 10 minutes behind, was grounded. Engine warning lights had come up during spin. No alternate bird was ready. At the command tent below, static garbled through the comms as the weather darkened. A lead instructor scanned the monitor. "Do we have a ready ladder crew?" A second voice answered, "No. Rivas's team is fueling. Maddox is down with the med kit. No one cleared." There was a pause. Then, "Shut it down. Abort the final loop. We'll pull them out by foot." Sloane was standing by the checklist post when the call came. She heard it twice, first from the channel, then again from the echo at the pad. "Shut it down." She stepped forward. Not fast, not loud. Her boots hit the matting just firm enough to be heard. "I can take the ladder." The men nearest the tower turned. One raised an eyebrow. Another laughed once under his breath. "You want to climb that one," said. "It's not a tethered sim, girl. It's high wind. Live rig." "I know," she said. Her voice didn't waver. "I've watched the hook-in system on every drill. I've logged the rungs. I know the sequence. I've practiced the knots." The instructor with the radio stared at her, confused. Another crewman leaned in, clearly annoyed. "This is not a test dummy drop," he said. "That's a human on the line." Sloane nodded once. "That's why I'll go." The instructor turned away. "We're calling it no one authorized." Then another voice came from behind the group. Chief Marcus Rivas. He was walking from the hangar, gloves half on, jacket open, his brow furrowed, eyes on Sloane. "You said you know the ladder." "Yes," she said. "I've studied it. I've practiced load bearing on slope terrain. I know the timing. I can climb stable, and I can lock in." "You ever been under a bird before?" "No," she said, "not in the air. But I've done every motion from the ground. Repeated. Logged. I know it." Rivas looked at the other men. He scanned the fog closing in behind the pad. "We don't have time to argue," he said. One of the crew opened the storage crate. The ladder was pulled clear. Rivas nodded once. "Harness her?" The crew chief blinked. "We're really doing this." Rivas answered without turning. "She just volunteered." "Did you—" Silence followed. Sloane stepped into the harness station. The webbing was stiff but familiar. She had handled it before, unofficially, during cleanup. Her gloves moved fast, not rushed, not hesitant. The wind tore through the open bay of the bird, now repositioned over the forward pad. The ladder was reloaded. The cabin light turned red. Inside the hold, no one spoke. She walked up the ramp with her shoulders squared, helmet clipped tight, breath steady. The checklist she had carried earlier now flapped from the rear clipboard, forgotten and untouched. One of the crewmen handed her the hook in. "You sure you're clipped?" "Yes." He didn't argue. She looked once toward the ridge. Then she stepped off the edge, and the rope ladder uncoiled behind her. The rotor wash slammed through the cabin in bursts, hot and violent. The UH-60 Blackhawk hovered low over the ridge, rear wheels angled slightly up, blades cutting at the air with steady force. Inside the bay, the noise was total wind, metal, static, warning tones blipping from systems on low reserve. The crew braced, their hands on grips and tie-downs, heads low. Sloane stood at the edge of the bay. Her boots were locked on the textured metal. The ladder swayed below, already half deployed, twisting in the wind. It snapped side to side as the air shifted. The fog below pulsed upward in soft, blinding bursts. She adjusted the harness once more. The hook-in clipped, locked, and she double-checked the carabiner gate. Behind her, one of the crew leaned in just close enough to speak. "She's going to fall." No one answered. The cable tech beside her hesitated, hands still on the ladder mount. His eyes flicked to Rivas across the hold. Rivas gave no signal, just watched. Sloane didn't wait. She reached for the ladder with her right hand, tested the swing, then stepped forward. The drop opened wide beneath her. Cold air hit her chest. Her boots caught the top rung, the weight shifted, and the entire ladder swung with her. Her body moved like she had rehearsed it in silence. Left hand down, right boot. Balance through the thighs, not the arms. She kept her core tight, head still. Her gloves gripped without tension. The fog closed around her shoulders. She blinked once, slowly, as the Black Hawk lifted slightly to maintain hover. The rope ladder stretched down into nothing. Each rung was its own test. The wind struck from angles. Updraft, side pull, a dead gust. She braced instinctively on the fourth step, leaning her weight into the sway, letting the motion pass through her instead of resisting it. Above her, no one spoke. She descended slowly, not pausing. The rungs shifted under her weight. The rhythm formed inside her breath. She counted it out without sound. 1. Lower. Hold. 2. Grip again. Her hands locked around the next rung with the precision of muscle memory she'd never been credited for having. No instructions were needed. She had studied the rig until she could feel it in her sleep. Wind hit her again, stronger now. The rope jerked, the entire ladder twisted, her body rolled with it. She didn't fight the motion, she used it to reach the next step faster. Her shoulder slid along the ladder rope. The harness remained tight against her spine, weight centered. Somewhere far above, a crew member leaned out slightly to track her descent, his expression unreadable. Helmet mic muted. Halfway down, the mist thickened. Her eyes adjusted. She could no longer see the bird clearly above, nor the ground below. Only rope, her gloves, and the sky moving in silent gray shapes. She breathed through her nose, kept moving. 6, 7, 8. Her left boot slipped slightly on a wet rung. The rope shifted. She corrected instantly, shifting her weight right, then downward. Her hands never lost grip. Her knees absorbed the twist. The ladder steadied. She continued. The wind changed, colder, wetter. She could smell pine now, and the faint scent of burned hydraulic fluid. She was close to the ledge. The fog thinned just enough for her to glimpse the slope. A figure was down there, low to the ground, kneeling, one leg stretched at an angle. Nate Ellis. She kept moving. Her boots found the final rung. She crouched, scanned the terrain, and locked her harness line to a rock anchor beside the outcrop. Then she unhooked from the climb rope, knelt beside him, and checked his harness. Ellis looked up. "You're the one who climbed." "Yes," she said. No explanation followed. Above them, the rotor beat continued, fading, then adjusting, then settling again. She tapped her radio. Package 1, clipped and ready. She gave the rope 2 short pulls. The line rose in answer. As Nate Ellis was lifted, he stared at her in disbelief. She watched the line rise into the fog until it vanished. Then she reset her harness and turned toward the others, still waiting for help. The wind pressed hard against the rocks as Sloane crouched beside Nate Ellis. His face was pale, jaw tight with pain, but his breathing was steady. His leg had swelled below the knee, likely a tendon strain or worse. He was partially clipped into the ridge anchor, but the rope had gone slack. His team stood just behind him, scattered in a wide half circle, unsure where to move or how to help. The rotor wash from the Black Hawk thundered above, churning the mist and dust into shifting sheets of gray and grit. Sloane didn't speak. She checked the anchor once, then pressed Ellis's harness into position. Her gloves moved quickly, tightening the shoulder cross and re-looping the chest clip. The tape on her palm held. The pressure didn't shake her hands. She looked up into the fog. The ladder was steady now, held by the rhythm of the aircraft above. She signaled twice with her hand, then guided the carabiner into place at Ellis's back. He gripped her wrist once as the line took his weight, but she didn't respond. She kept her eyes on the signal crew above. The lift began. He rose slowly, legs swaying slightly, mouth drawn tight. She tracked the arc of his ascent until he vanished into the cloud line. The wind shifted again. Sloane turned back toward the slope. Mia Trent stood with her hands half up, eyes wide. She was the smallest of the evac team, maybe 19 or 20. Boots too large for her frame. Her voice didn't carry over the noise, but she was clearly calling something. Sloane nodded once, gestured low, and moved toward her. The rope ladder hung just above the edge of the slope now. Sloane caught it with one hand and tested the sway. Her boots braced, her harness still clipped. She pulled herself up, foot over foot, body aligned with the tension in the rope. She climbed fast, not reckless, not careful, just exact. She reached the open bay in under 30 seconds. The moment her boots hit the deck, she turned, unhooked from her tether, clipped in again, and reached for the next line. Mia was still waiting at the edge, arms wrapped around herself. Sloane hit the slope again, boots sliding once but correcting immediately. She moved low, steady. The girl didn't resist. Sloane guided her into the harness, adjusted the belt, and clipped her onto the active line. This time, Mia gripped Sloane's arm and held it longer. Sloane didn't speak. She only checked the final clip and nodded. The girl was lifted. Up, into the clouds, into the roar. Sloane remained crouched. Her breath had shortened now, but only slightly. Her gloves were damp. She flexed her fingers once, then turned to the last evac. Evan Cho stood tall, squared up, arms crossed. He wasn't shaking. His uniform was cut along the sleeve, probably from the first fall. He looked like he wanted to object, to say he could climb it himself, but he didn't speak. He stepped into the harness and held still as Sloane checked it. This one was different. The line had frayed during Mia's lift, not cut, not unsafe, but clearly stressed. Sloane paused. She looked at Cho, then at the ladder swaying above. 2 tugs wouldn't be enough this time. It would have to be both of them. She clipped herself in alongside him. Double line, single climb. The crew above might hesitate. There wouldn't be a clean lift signal. They'd have to trust her. She took one breath, checked his secondary harness loop, and locked it to her shoulder bracket. Then they moved. Up the ladder, her on the inside, Cho just to the right. Every rung had changed. The weight doubled. Her arms bore not only her own frame, but the shifting pull of his balance. His boots found poor purchase. Her body shifted each time to adjust the line. She didn't look up. She counted. 1. Grip. 2. Hold. The mist thickened again. Her gloves slipped once, but she recovered without pause. Cho didn't speak. He simply climbed when she did, pressed forward when she braced. They rose together like a single shape against the air. Above, the Black Hawk held position. Below, the slope vanished into dust and fog. The next rung was wet. Her foot missed. She hung suspended for half a breath, weight off-center. Then she twisted her hips, found the rope with the side of her boot, and corrected. Cho's breath hitched behind her. Still no words, only motion. 10, 11. Each step pulled harder. The final 5 meters felt like lifting a wall. But she didn't stop. She reached the bay edge, extended her hand back, and guided him forward. The crewman who had muttered earlier was already reaching. He caught Cho first, pulled him in, then reached again. Sloane didn't wait for the hand. She climbed in on her own. Boots hit steel. She unclipped her line, turned toward the hold, and stood upright. No one said a word. Riva stepped forward, his helmet still on, visor dark. She met his gaze for half a second, then turned away, crouched beside the wall, and began coiling the secondary rope without being asked. Cho sat down hard beside the bulkhead, helmet in his lap, chest rising and falling. Mia was already holding onto the grab rail, staring at Sloane like she couldn't believe what she'd seen. The crew reset the ladder. One reached for Sloane's arm, paused, then just nodded once and turned back to his gear. The bay light changed from red to white. The Black Hawk tilted gently forward and peeled away from the ridge. The slope disappeared behind them. Inside, the hold remained silent. Sloane rested her hand against the floor plate, the metal still warm from friction. Her gloves were cracked now, one fingertip torn, the skin beneath red. She flexed her hand once, then returned to her seat and strapped in. No applause, no announcement. Just a girl who climbed because it had to be done. And now, even the ones who doubted her couldn't look away. The debrief tent hummed with leftover adrenaline. Boots thudded across the plastic flooring. Gear dropped against walls. Someone shouted for water. Another tossed a helmet onto the bench and stretched his arms, already halfway into a story about thermal drift. Voices overlapped in short bursts, each one louder than the last. Laughter mixed with exhaustion. A few joked about who had slipped where, which comms channel failed, who got spun too fast in the first evac. The ones who hadn't seen the ridge firsthand assumed it was just another rough sim. Sloane stood near the back wall, half in shadow, her gear half off. No one asked her anything. She didn't speak. A comms officer stepped forward and powered on the main monitor. The noise didn't stop immediately, but it started to shift. The crowd leaned slightly toward the screen. The first frame blinked into focus mist. Slope. Static. Someone from the flight board said, "Command wants eyes on the final lift." Full footage. That brought a few groans. One trainee grinned. Hope they got my good side. The video didn't open on him. It opened on Sloane. The drone camera had been active the entire time. From high above the valley, it captured the hover, the twisting ladder, and the single figure stepping onto it. There was no narration, no tagline, just the silent footage, time-stamped in the corner. A few in the crowd leaned forward. On screen, the figure in the harness adjusted the clips, tested the ladder, and began to descend. Someone murmured, "That's her." The laughter didn't start again. Instead, the tent grew still. On the left side of the monitor, a second window opened telemetry data. The drone's readout of altitude, wind vectors, temperature drop, all indexed in sequence. Every shift in the rope ladder was marked, every angle of drift recorded. The screen synced with the footage frame by frame. As the descent continued, so did the silence. The camera followed Sloane's body as it moved down the rope with total control. Hands steady, boots placed without hesitation. The ladder twisted. She absorbed it. The mist thickened. She didn't pause. Captain Oliver Vance stepped into the tent halfway through the first sequence. He didn't speak. He folded his arms, eyes fixed on the screen. The first lift began. Nate Ellis clipped in, harnessed, guided up the side of the slope. Sloane stood below, already turning to reset. Then the climb. The drone zoomed in on her return up the rope ladder. It was fast, too fast for someone cleared only as non-eval. One of the trainees shifted on his feet. Another reached slowly for the edge of the bench and sat down. The second evac, Mia Trent, appeared next. The screen caught her shaking, crouched low, arms clinging to the line. Sloane wrapped the harness, signaled, sent her up. No sound, just rotor wash and white mist in the background, no talking, no crowd, just work. Lieutenant Rachel Thorne stood in the far right corner, arms crossed. She hadn't moved since the video began. Now, she stepped one pace closer. The final footage rolled. The climb with Evan Cho. Double line, shared rope, side by side up the ladder. The strain was obvious. The ladder bent harder. The ropes flexed under weight. Sloane adjusted once midair, shifting her body into the swing to keep balance. The tent had gone fully silent. Not a single boot shifted. Not one voice broke the air. Frame by frame, they rose. When she reached the bay and pulled Cho inside, The camera held. She did not raise her arms. She did not speak. She turned, sat, coiled the rope, and the footage ended. No applause, just the sound of the drone clicking off. The mission board behind the screen flickered. A staff member walked forward and updated the log. Names shuffled on the white screen. Sloane's moved to the top. Qualified rope ladder airborne, rating 100.0. A trainee near the edge of the crowd whispered, "Who let her do that?" Another answered, just loud enough to carry. She didn't wait for permission. At the back of the tent, Lieutenant Thorne moved forward again. She stood beside Captain Vance. Neither spoke. Vance tapped the screen once, then lowered his hand. Sharp's flight notes sat on the crate beside him. He didn't pick them up. Rivas appeared in the flap and crossed his arms. His eyes went to the screen, then to Sloane, then to the room. He didn't need to say it. They saw her now. Sloane didn't move. She stood still in the back, her helmet clipped to her vest, gloves looped through her belt. She didn't change her expression. She didn't step forward. She didn't need to. The recognition had already landed. She had climbed for them. Now they understood what they had watched. Not luck, not chance, not adrenaline. Control, precision, memory. Training done in silence, tied knots behind tents, repaired gloves, looped rope, studied patterns. Earned. The tent began to clear out slowly, bodies moving like a tide receding. No one laughed anymore. No one shoved. Some nodded as they passed her. One or two glanced but couldn't hold the look. Outside, the wind had died. The air smelled like cold metal and pine. Sloane stepped out last. Behind her, the screen went black. The pad was quiet now. The wind had pulled back to a soft drift, just enough to stir the edge of a tarp and carry the faint sound of rotor blades ticking as they cooled. The fog thinned near the tree line but still clung to the gravel underfoot. The sun wasn't fully up, but the light had changed. No more floodlights. No more alarms. Just the dull gray of early morning across steel and stone. Sloane stood beside the UH-60 Blackhawk, alone on the edge of the pad. The aircraft loomed behind her, still streaked with dust from the day before. The tail boom caught the low light. The rope ladder lay coiled at her feet. She worked slowly, bare-handed now, checking each rung for tension, adjusting the line for even spacing, and binding the final coil into a neat stack. The rhythm was steady, her posture relaxed. A pair of gloves sat folded on the gear crate beside her. The left one still showed the tape she had wrapped around the palm. It held. She didn't look up when the younger cadet passed. The girl slowed just enough to say something on her way to the fuel truck. "They're calling you Ladder Ghost." Sloane didn't answer right away. She cinched the tie strap once, then picked up the coil and set it on the crate. Her hand brushed the edge of the folded glove. "I'm just here to climb," she said. The cadet smiled once, nodded, and moved on. The words hung there for a moment, soft and weightless. Then the wind caught them and scattered them across the empty pad. Sloane stepped back and walked around the rear of the bird, her fingers trailing briefly across the tail section. She checked the latch cover, confirmed the bolts, then glanced at the window. Her reflection looked back at her, blurred slightly by the curve of the glass and a layer of dust. She didn't adjust her stance. She didn't need to. Far away, in another tent, a screen glowed on a secured channel. Someone no name, no rank had looped the drone footage and pushed it through the internal network. It wasn't labeled. It didn't need to be. It started mid-hover. The rope ladder swung. Sloane stepped off the bird, climbed down, lifted 3 people out, climbed back in. The footage played on repeat. No commentary, no caption. Just one clipped sentence anchored in the bottom corner. She wasn't even cleared to climb. No audio, just her movement, just the climb. It passed from unit to unit, tent to tent. Quiet nods followed it. Instructors paused when it appeared. Young cadets saved the clip and watched it again without speaking. In chow lines, in gear checks, after lights out. Back on the pad, Sloane finished her checks. She looped the harness bag into its bracket, tied off the last line, and closed the crate. The sun reached the edge of the ridge and spilled across the steel skin of the Black Hawk. She stepped out of its shadow and walked toward the tool tent. No one stopped her. No one needed to. They all knew who she was now. She was never meant to be the one. They called her deadweight, handed her clipboards, and kept her off the drills. But while others chased rank or attention, she studied in silence. She tied every knot until it lived in her hands. When the real moment came, the one no one planned. She was already prepared. Sloane didn't climb for credit. She climbed because someone had to. And in that act, she rewrote how they saw her. Not with speeches, not with rank, but with action. This story is about the strength that builds quietly, the kind that waits for the right moment and doesn't miss it. If you've ever been overlooked, remember what Sloane did with that silence. Reflect on her story, share your thoughts below, and follow for more powerful moments like this, because sometimes the quietest person in the room is already climbing.